pay very close attention. Because what you're about to hear in the next 60 minutes was never meant to reach you. It was buried, deliberately, beneath centuries of moral conditioning, social programming, and comfortable lies designed to keep you reactive, emotional, and easy to control. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not to me, but to yourself. When was the last time someone got under your skin? When was the last time a word, a look, a silence from another person hijacked your entire day? When was the last time you handed over your power? Not because someone took it, but because you gave it away freely, unconsciously, like a man bleeding and not even knowing where the wound is? If the answer is recent, and for most people, it is, then you are exactly where you need to be right now. This video is not motivation. This is not a pep talk. This is not some shallow advice wrapped in soft music telling you to believe in yourself. No. What this truly is a surgical intervention, a rewiring, a controlled demolition of everything weak inside you so that something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous can take its place. By the time this video ends, you will not be the same person who pressed play. That is not a promise. That is a warning. Niccolò Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives refusing to accept. He understood that the world does not reward the emotional. It does not celebrate the reactive. It does not protect the soft. The world, the real world, not the fairy tale you were sold as a child, is a chessboard. And on that chessboard, the pieces that survive are not the ones that feel the most. They are the ones that see the most. They are the ones who learn to detach, cold detachment. Say it slowly. Let the words settle in your mind like a blade resting on a table. Cold detachment. This is not about becoming heartless. This is not about shutting down your emotions or walking through life like a ghost. That is what the weak think detachment means, because they have never understood it. Real detachment, Machiavellian detachment, is the ability to feel everything and be moved by nothing. It is the capacity to stand in the middle of chaos, provocation, betrayal, and emotional manipulation, and remain absolutely, terrifyingly still, not because you do not care, but because you have chosen, with surgical precision, what deserves your energy and what does not. And that choice, that single, deliberate choice, is the most powerful weapon you will ever hold. Think about your life right now. Think about the people in it. Think about the situations that drain you, the conversations that leave you hollow, the relationships that take more than they give. Now ask yourself this: how much of that suffering is caused by what actually happens to you, and how much is caused by how you react to what happens to you? If you are honest, truly, brutally honest, you will realize that the vast majority of your pain is self-inflicted. Not because you are weak, but because no one ever taught you the alternative. You were raised in a world that told you to express everything, feel everything, share everything, react to everything. You were told that vulnerability is strength, that wearing your heart on your sleeve is brave, that being emotional means being authentic. And on the surface, that sounds beautiful. It sounds human. But underneath that beautiful surface is a trap. Because when you react to everything, you control nothing. When you express every emotion the moment it arises, you hand the remote control of your inner world to anyone who knows which button to press. And believe me, there are people in your life who know exactly which buttons to press. They have studied you. They have mapped your triggers. And every single time you explode, every single time you defend yourself with emotion instead of strategy, every single time you take the bait, they win. Not because they are smarter than you, but because you are more predictable than them. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that a ruler must learn how not to be good. But that line has been misquoted, misunderstood, and misused for 500 years. He was not telling you to be evil. He was telling you to be free, free from the compulsion to react, free from the addiction to being liked, free from the desperate need to prove yourself to people who have no authority over your life. He was saying that the man who can sit in a room full of provocation and remain unmoved, that man holds more power than the one who controls armies. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the truth about cold detachment is that it asks you to give up something you are deeply addicted to. It asks you to give up the drama, the emotional chaos, the adrenaline of conflict, the righteous anger, the satisfying explosion of telling someone exactly what you think. You are addicted to reaction. You are addicted to being provoked, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar. And familiarity, no matter how destructive, is the cage most people choose to die in. Let me paint a picture for you. You are at work, a colleague, someone who has always envied your competence, your quiet strength, makes a comment. It is subtle, it is wrapped in humor, but you feel the blade underneath the joke. Your jaw tightens, your chest heats up. Every fiber of your being screams at you to respond, to clap back, to put them in their place. And this is the moment. This is the fork in the road that separates the reactive from the strategic, the amateur from the master, the emotional from the dangerous. The reactive man fires back. He defends his honor. He wins the moment, but he loses the war. Because now everyone in the room has seen his trigger. Everyone knows exactly what gets under his skin. He has given a public demonstration of his weaknesses, and every predator in the room has taken notes. The detached man, he does something far more terrifying. He pauses. He looks at the person who made the comment. Not with anger, not with hurt, not with the desperate need to prove anything. He looks at them with a calm so deep it feels like the silence before a storm. And then he does the most powerful thing a human being can do in a moment of provocation. Nothing. He does absolutely nothing. He might smile, slightly, just enough to say, "I heard you. I understood you. And you are not worth the energy it would take to respond." Then he returns to what he was doing, calmly, completely, as if the provocation never existed. And in that moment, something shifts. The room feels it. The person who made the comment feels it. Because silence, when it comes from a place of power rather than weakness, is the loudest sound in any room. It does not beg for attention. It commands it. It does not ask for respect. It forces it. And the person who tried to provoke you, they are left standing in the wreckage of their own attempt, exposed, not you. This is what Machiavelli meant when he spoke of the fox. Not the lion, who relies on brute force and intimidation. The fox, the one who sees the traps, the one who moves through the world with a quiet intelligence that most people mistake for passivity, until it is far too late. You see, most people believe that power is loud. They believe that dominance requires aggression, that strength means confrontation, that winning means destroying. But that is the philosophy of the amateur. That is the worldview of someone who has never studied how real power operates. Real power, the kind that builds empires, that topples kings, that reshapes the course of history, is almost always silent. It moves in shadows. It operates in the space between words. It lives in what is not said, not shown, not given away. And this is the art you are going to learn. Not just intellectually, not just as a concept you nod along to and then forget by tomorrow. You are going to learn it in your bones. You are going to learn it so deeply that it becomes your default setting, so that the next time someone tries to provoke you, the next time life throws chaos at your door, the next time your emotions scream at you to react, you will feel a new voice inside you, calm, measured, strategic. A voice that says, "I see this for what it is, and I choose not to play." Let me be clear about something. This is not easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. If cold detachment were a natural human skill, the world would not be filled with people destroying their own lives through impulsive reactions, emotional outbursts, and decisions made in the heat of a moment that evaporates as quickly as it arrived. The reason this is rare is because it requires something that most people are terrified of. It requires you to sit with discomfort without acting on it. It requires you to feel the fire and not throw gasoline on it. It requires you to watch yourself wanting to react and choosing, deliberately, not to. That gap, the gap between stimulus and response, is the most sacred space in human psychology. Viktor Frankl spoke of it. The Stoics built entire philosophies around it. And Machiavelli weaponized it. He understood that the person who controls that gap controls everything. Because in that gap, you are no longer a slave to your impulses. In that gap, you are free. And a free man, a truly free man, is the most dangerous creature on this earth. Not because of what he does, but because of what he refuses to do. Think about the people who have truly unsettled you in your life. Not the loud ones, not the aggressive ones, not the people who screamed and threatened and threw their weight around. Those people are predictable. They are noise, nothing more. The ones who truly unsettled you, who made you feel something you could not quite name, were the quiet ones. The ones who watched. The ones who said less than everyone else, but seemed to see more than everyone else. The ones whose silence carried more weight than any word ever could. That is the energy you are going to build. That is the frequency you are going to operate on. Not because it makes you better than anyone, but because it makes you unreachable. And when you are unreachable, something incredible happens. People stop trying to pull you down because they realize there is nothing to grab. People stop trying to provoke you because they realize there is nothing to ignite. People stop trying to control you because they realize there is nothing to manipulate. You become, in the truest sense of the word, free. But here is the paradox that Machiavelli understood better than anyone. When you stop needing power over others, you gain it. When you stop craving their approval, they start offering it. When you stop reacting to their games, they start playing by your rules. Detachment is not the absence of power. It is the highest form of it. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, this sounds cold. This sounds inhuman. This sounds like shutting down, closing off, becoming a robot. And I understand that fear. I understand it because I once stood exactly where you are standing. I once believed that feeling everything deeply was a sign of strength. I once believed that reacting passionately was proof that I cared. But let me tell you what I learned. What years of pain, failed relationships, missed opportunities, and unnecessary conflicts taught me. Feeling everything is not strength. It is exposure. Reacting to everything is not passion. It is captivity. The person who feels the storm and remains anchored is not less human than the one who gets swept away. They are more human because they have made a choice, and the ability to choose, to consciously, deliberately choose your response to the world rather than being dragged through it by your emotions. That is the very definition of what separates a human being from every other creature on this planet. Machiavelli did not write for the masses. He wrote for the individual who was ready to see the world as it truly is, not as they wished it to be. He wrote for the person who was tired of being played, tired of being predictable, tired of bleeding from wounds they kept reopening themselves. He wrote for you. But only if you are ready. Only if you are willing to look at your own patterns, your own reactions, your own triggers, and say, enough. I am done being a puppet in my own life. Cold detachment starts with one brutal admission. You are addicted to your own reactivity. You are addicted to the rush of anger, the flood of indignation, the comforting heat of self-righteousness. Every time you react impulsively, your brain gives you a hit of neurochemical satisfaction. It feels like justice. It feels like standing up for yourself. But it is a trap, because 5 minutes later, an hour later, a day later, you look back at what you said, what you did, what you revealed about yourself, and you feel something far worse than the original provocation. You feel regret. And regret is the tax the reactive man pays for the temporary pleasure of losing control. The detached man pays no such tax. Because the detached man has learned something that takes most people a lifetime to understand, if they ever understand it at all. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every provocation deserves a response. Not every person who tries to pull you into their chaos deserves the gift of your attention. And yes, your attention is a gift. Your energy is a gift. Your emotional presence is a gift. And gifts should be given deliberately, not stolen by anyone clever enough to bait you. There is a reason why the greatest leaders in history were not known for their outbursts. There is a reason why the most powerful figures, the ones who shaped the world, the ones whose names echo through centuries, were described not as emotional, not as reactive, but as calculated, measured. Still, they understood what you are beginning to understand right now, that the man who controls himself needs no one else to control him, and the man who cannot control himself will be controlled by everyone. This is not theory. This is not philosophy for the sake of philosophy. This is the operating system of power. This is the hidden architecture beneath every successful negotiation, every strategic relationship, every moment where someone walked into a room and, without saying a word, owned it. They owned it not because they were the loudest, not because they were the most aggressive, but because they were the most composed, the most still, the most dangerously, unshakably calm. And that is exactly what you are going to become. Not overnight, not through some magical transformation that happens by the end of this video, but through a gradual, relentless, daily practice of choosing stillness over chaos, strategy over impulse, observation over reaction. You are going to train yourself the way a swordsman trains, not for the spectacle, not for the applause, but for the moment when the blade is at your throat and every fiber of your being screams at you to panic. And instead, you breathe, you see, you move, with precision, with control, with the kind of cold, elegant power that cannot be taught in a classroom, only forged in the fire of real life. Machiavelli once observed that men are so simple of mind and so dominated by their immediate needs, that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are willing to be deceived. Read that again. Not quickly, slowly. Let every word settle. He was not insulting humanity. He was diagnosing it. He was telling you, 500 years before the age of social media, before the dopamine economy, before the entire world was designed to exploit your reactions, that most people will always be controlled by their impulses. Most people will always react before they think. Most people will always choose the comfort of familiar pain over the discomfort of strategic growth. But you are not most people. If you were, you would not be here. You would not have clicked on this video. You would not have stayed this long. Something inside you recognizes what is being said here, not because it is new, but because it is something you have always felt but never had the words for. You have always known that there was a different way to move through the world, a quieter way, a sharper way, a way that does not require you to shout to be heard, to fight to be respected, to bleed to prove you are alive. That way has a name, and that name is cold detachment. If you have understood everything I have said so far, if something has shifted inside you, even slightly, then stay with me. Because what comes next is not just the theory. What comes next is the architecture, the blueprint, the step-by-step dismantling of the reactive self and the methodical construction of something far more powerful. This is where the real work begins. There are 5 pillars of cold detachment, 5 invisible structures that hold up the entire architecture of a mind that cannot be shaken. These are not theories. They are not abstract ideas you read about and forget. They are living principles, pillars forged in the fires of human conflict, tested across centuries and proven by every figure who ever held real, lasting power. Machiavelli understood each one of them, and now, so will you. The first pillar, emotional sovereignty. This is the foundation. Without this, nothing else works. Emotional sovereignty means that you, and only you, decide what you feel, when you feel it, and how long you feel it. It means that no external event, no person, no word, no betrayal, no provocation has automatic access to your inner world. They must be granted entry. And you are the gatekeeper. Most people live the opposite way. Their emotional state is a public highway. Anyone can drive through it at any time. A rude comment from a stranger derails their morning. A dismissive text from a friend ruins their afternoon. A perceived slight at work poisons their evening. They wake up neutral, and by noon, they have been emotionally hijacked 17 times by people who will never think about them again. This is not living. This is being lived. This is being a puppet whose strings are pulled by every passing hand. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must have a mind ready to turn in any direction as the winds of fortune demand. But notice the precision of that language. He did not say the prince should be blown by the winds. He said the prince should turn. There is a universe of difference between those two actions. One is passive, a leaf caught in a storm. The other is active, a ship adjusting its sails. The leaf has no choice. The ship has a captain, and that captain is you. Emotional sovereignty does not mean you feel nothing. It means you feel everything through a filter of awareness. When anger rises, you see it. You acknowledge it. You name it. But you do not become it. You do not let it take the wheel and drive you into a wall. When sadness descends, you sit with it. You allow it space. But you do not let it become your identity. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness behind your emotions, and that awareness, that calm, observing presence, is the seat of all true power. Here is a practical test. Think of the last time you were angry, really angry. The kind of anger that turns your vision red and makes your pulse thunder in your ears. Now ask yourself, in that moment, were you choosing to be angry, or was the anger choosing you? Were you in control, or were you being controlled? If the answer is that the anger was running the show, if the answer is that you were a passenger in your own mind, then you understand why this first pillar is everything. The second pillar, strategic silence. If emotional sovereignty is the foundation, strategic silence is the walls. It is the armor you wear in every interaction, the shield that protects your intentions, your plans, your vulnerabilities from the prying eyes of those who would use them against you. Machiavelli understood that information is the currency of power. The more people know about you, your desires, your fears, your plans, your weaknesses, the more leverage they hold over you. Every word you speak is a coin spent. Every emotion you reveal is a card shown. And the person who shows all their cards before the game even begins is not brave, they are bankrupt. Strategic silence is not about being mute. It is not about never speaking. That would be as foolish as never stopping. It is about speaking with intention. It is about understanding that every word you release into the world carries weight, creates impressions, builds or destroys perceptions, and can never be taken back. The reactive man speaks to release pressure. The detached man speaks to create effect. Think about the most powerful people you have ever been in a room with. Not the ones with the loudest voices or the most impressive titles. The ones who truly held the room. What did they have in common? They spoke less. They listened more. They chose their words the way a surgeon chooses instruments, with precision, with purpose, with an awareness that every cut matters. They did not fill silences with nervous chatter. They did not rush to express opinions before anyone asked. They sat, they observed, they waited. And when they finally spoke, The room leaned in. Because when a person who rarely speaks opens their mouth, the world pays attention. This is the weaponization of silence, and Machiavelli was its greatest architect. He knew that the man who speaks first in a negotiation loses. He knew that the man who reveals his anger gives his enemy a map to his destruction. He knew that the pause, the deliberate, uncomfortable, loaded pause, is more powerful than any argument. Because in that pause, the other person's mind fills with their own projections, their own fears, their own assumptions, and those assumptions almost always work in your favor. Here is a rule that will change your life if you let it. Before you speak, ask yourself 3 questions. Does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? Does this need to be said by me right now? If the answer to any of these is no, close your mouth. Guard your words like gold. Because in the economy of power, the man who speaks least often speaks loudest. The 3rd pillar, observational dominance. While the world is busy talking, reacting, performing, and competing for attention, the detached man is doing something far more valuable. He is watching. He is reading the room like a text. He is decoding body language, tracking micro-expressions, cataloging patterns of behavior, and building a mental database of everyone around him. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their triggers, their desires, their fears. He sees what others miss because he is not distracted by the noise of his own emotions. Machiavelli was obsessed with observation. He studied human behavior the way a scientist studies organisms, with clinical detachment and ruthless precision. He did not judge people for being ambitious, selfish, fearful, or manipulative. He simply noted it. He catalogued it, and then he used that knowledge to predict their behavior with terrifying accuracy. This is what observational dominance looks like in practice. You are at a dinner party. Everyone is talking, laughing, performing their social roles. The extrovert is commanding the table with stories. The insecure one is laughing too loudly at every joke. The ambitious one is subtly steering the conversation toward their achievements. The manipulator is flattering everyone, testing who responds to praise like a dog responds to treats. You see all of this, not because you are paranoid, not because you distrust people, but because you have trained your eyes to look past the surface and see the machinery underneath. And here is the terrifying part. For them, not for you. The person who observes without reacting holds all the information and reveals none. They know everyone's cards while showing none of their own. In any social game, in any negotiation, in any conflict, that person has already won. Not because they are the strongest, but because they are the most informed. And information, as Machiavelli knew, is the ultimate weapon. Most people walk through life, broadcasting their every thought, emotion, and intention like a radio with a broken dial. They cannot help it. They have never been taught to observe because they have always been taught to perform, but you are going to learn to turn down that broadcast. You are going to learn to become the antenna, not the signal. You are going to learn to receive far more than you transmit. And in doing so, you will gain an advantage that no amount of money, status, or brute force can match. The 4th pillar, calculated patience. This is where most people fail, because patience in a world addicted to speed is the rarest form of power. Everyone wants results now. Everyone wants to react now. Everyone wants satisfaction now. But the detached man understands something that the impulsive man never will. Time is a weapon, and the person who can wait longer, endure longer, remain still longer, that person almost always wins. Machiavelli studied the great military campaigns of history and found a pattern that repeated itself across centuries and civilizations. The generals who won were rarely the most aggressive. They were the most patient. They were the ones who could sit at the edge of a battlefield, watching their enemy grow restless, watching them make mistakes born of impatience, and then, only then, moving with devastating precision. The strike was never early. The strike was never late. It was exactly on time. And that timing, that exquisite, inhuman patience, was what separated the conqueror from the conquered. Apply this to your daily life. Think about the arguments you have lost, not because you were wrong, but because you were impatient. You rushed to prove your point. You interrupted. You escalated when you should have waited. Now think about what would have happened if you had simply paused, if you had let the other person exhaust their energy. If you had waited for the moment when they said too much, revealed too much, overextended themselves, and then, with surgical calm, delivered your response. Not in anger, not in defensiveness, but with the quiet precision of someone who has been watching, waiting, and choosing the perfect moment to speak. That is calculated patience, and it is devastating. There is an old strategic principle that says, never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. This is pure Machiavelli. This is the essence of cold detachment applied to real-world conflict, because when someone is emotional, when they are reacting, when they are in the grip of their own impulses, they are vulnerable. They are making mistakes. They are revealing information. They are weakening their own position with every word they speak. And the detached man sits across from them, calm as still water, watching it all unfold, gathering every piece of intelligence, and waiting for the moment when a single, well-placed response will end the entire game. You do not need to be faster. You need to be more patient. You do not need to be louder. You need to be more still. You do not need to react quickly. You need to respond precisely. And precision requires time. It requires observation. It requires the cold, unflinching willingness to wait, even when every instinct screams at you to move. The fifth pillar, controlled vulnerability. This is the most counterintuitive pillar of all, and it is the one that separates the truly powerful from the merely cold. Because cold detachment, without this final pillar, becomes something brittle, something rigid, something that breaks under enough pressure. But with controlled vulnerability, it becomes something alive, something flexible, something genuinely dangerous. Controlled vulnerability means choosing, strategically, deliberately, when and how much of yourself to reveal. It means understanding that showing weakness is not always weakness. Sometimes it is a trap. Sometimes allowing someone to see a crack in your armor is the most strategic move you can make, because it lowers their guard. It makes them underestimate you. It makes them feel safe, comfortable, superior. And a person who feels superior is a person who has stopped paying attention. And a person who has stopped paying attention is a person who has already lost. Machiavelli wrote about this with devastating clarity. He described how the fox succeeds, not through force, but through the appearance of what it is not. The fox does not announce its intelligence. It does not broadcast its strategy. It allows others to believe what they wish, and uses their beliefs as weapons against them. This is not dishonesty. This is survival. This is the recognition that in a world full of people trying to read you, control you, and predict you, the greatest advantage you can have is being unknowable. Controlled vulnerability also means something deeper. It means being strong enough to be gentle when the moment calls for it. It means understanding that the truly powerful do not need to prove their power in every interaction. Sometimes, the most strategic thing you can do is show warmth, show kindness, show a flash of humanity that makes others trust you, confide in you, lower their walls around you. Not because you are manipulating them, but because you understand that true influence, lasting influence, is built on connection, not just dominance. The man who is only cold is predictable. The man who is cold and capable of warmth is mysterious. And mystery, as Machiavelli understood, is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. We are drawn to what we cannot understand. We are fascinated by what we cannot predict. We give our attention, our loyalty, our respect to those who remain just slightly out of reach, close enough to be compelling, distant enough to be magnetic. These 5 pillars, emotional sovereignty, strategic silence, observational dominance, calculated patience, and controlled vulnerability, are not separate skills. They are interconnected. They feed each other. They reinforce each other. Master one, and the others become easier. Master all 5, and you become something that most people will never encounter in their lifetime. A person who cannot be manipulated, cannot be provoked, cannot be controlled, and yet remains deeply, magnetically human. Now let me show you how these pillars operate in the 3 arenas where they matter most: your professional life, your personal relationships, and your social world. In the professional arena, cold detachment is the difference between being a player and being played. Most people walk into their workplace every day and immediately plug into the emotional grid. They absorb the stress of their colleagues. They react to office politics. They take criticism personally. They fight battles that do not matter, defend territory that does not exist, and exhaust themselves in conflicts that have no winners. They go home drained, not because the work was hard, but because the emotional labor was overwhelming. The detached professional operates differently. They walk into the same environment and see it for what it is: a system of incentives, hierarchies, alliances, and competitions. They do not take things personally because they understand that professional interactions are rarely personal. They are strategic. They are functional. They are people pursuing their own interests, as Machiavelli would say, and there is nothing wrong with that, as long as you are pursuing yours with equal intelligence. When a superior criticizes their work, the detached professional does not bristle. They listen. They extract the useful information. They discard the emotional noise. And they improve. When a colleague takes credit for their idea, the detached professional does not explode. They note it. They file it. And they adjust their strategy accordingly, perhaps sharing future ideas differently, perhaps building alliances with those who appreciate their contribution, perhaps simply waiting for the moment when the truth becomes undeniable. In personal relationships, cold detachment is not the opposite of love. It is the protector of love. Because the greatest threat to any relationship is not conflict. It is reactivity. It is the moment when the person you love says something that triggers you, and instead of pausing, breathing, and choosing your response, you fire back with words designed to wound. Words you cannot take back. Words that create fractures that take months, sometimes years, sometimes forever to heal. The detached partner does not love less. They love more strategically. When conflict arises, they do not escalate. They de-escalate. They listen more than they speak. They seek to understand before seeking to be understood. They recognize that their partner's anger, just like their own, is usually a mask for something deeper: fear, insecurity, unmet needs, and they address the root, not the symptom. And in social interactions, cold detachment gives you something that no amount of charm or charisma can match: genuine presence. Because the person who is not performing, not competing, not seeking approval, that person is fully present. They are there, completely, and people feel it. They feel the difference between someone who is listening to respond and someone who is listening to understand. They feel the difference between someone who is looking at them to be seen and someone who is looking at them to see. There is another dimension to social detachment that most people never consider, and that is how you handle success. Because most people think detachment is only about handling attacks, provocations, and negative situations. But one of the greatest tests of detachment is what you do when things go right, when you win, when you succeed, when the room applauds. The reactive man celebrates loudly. He broadcasts his victories. He lets everyone know that he has won, that he was right, that he has triumphed. And in doing so, he creates enemies. He creates resentment. He creates targets on his own back that would never have existed if he had simply accepted the victory in silence. The detached man wins differently. He wins quietly. He does not gloat. He does not announce. He does not need the world to validate what he already knows. His victories are collected, catalogued, and carried in silence, not because he does not value them, but because he values them too much to cheapen them with performance. Machiavelli observed this in the leaders he studied. The most successful ones were not the ones who celebrated their victories the loudest. They were the ones who moved immediately to the next position, the next strategy, the next game. They did not dwell on wins because they understood that every victory, no matter how significant, is temporary. The board resets, the pieces rearrange, the game continues, and the man who is still celebrating his last win while the next move is being made against him, that man is already losing. There is a phrase that captures this perfectly. The graveyard is full of indispensable men. No matter how great your victory, no matter how powerful your position, no matter how unshakable you feel in this moment, the game continues. And the only way to stay ahead is to keep moving, keep observing, keep adapting with the same cold, measured precision that brought you the victory in the first place. Apply this to your professional life. You get the promotion, the raise, the recognition you have been working toward. The reactive man updates his social media. He tells everyone who will listen. He carries the trophy like a crown, making sure every eye in the room sees it. The detached man, he says thank you. He returns to his desk. He begins working on the next objective, not because he is not proud, but because he understands that the moment you stop moving forward, the world begins moving past you. Apply this to your personal relationships. Someone who wronged you finally apologizes, finally admits they were wrong. The reactive man seizes the moment to say, "I told you so." He extracts every ounce of satisfaction from the admission. He makes the other person pay over and over for what they did. The detached man accepts the apology. Simply, completely, without drama, without scorekeeping, without using the moment as leverage for future negotiations, because he understands that the person who keeps tallying the score is still playing a game, and he stopped playing long ago. This is what it means to win without winning, to succeed without needing success to define you, to move through the world with such deep internal security that external validation, whether positive or negative, becomes background noise, pleasant when it comes, irrelevant when it does not. But the coldest move, the most devastating application of everything we have discussed, is still ahead. Stay with me, because what comes next will change not just how you think, but how you move through the world. Everything you have heard so far has been preparation, the philosophy, the architecture, the framework. Now it is time to build. Now it is time to take these principles off the page and press them into the living tissue of your daily existence. Because knowledge without application is just entertainment. And you did not come here to be entertained. You came here to be transformed. Let me give you the first tactic, and it is the most important one. I call it the 3-second rule. And it is devastatingly simple. Every time something happens that triggers an emotional reaction, a comment, an insult, a disappointment, a provocation, you do not respond for 3 seconds, 3 full seconds. You breathe. You observe the emotion rising inside you. You watch it the way a scientist watches a chemical reaction in a glass container, with curiosity, not involvement. And in those 3 seconds, something miraculous happens. The impulse to react begins to lose its grip. The emotional flood begins to recede, and in its place, a gap opens, a space, a moment of clarity where you can choose, actually choose, what to do next. This sounds simple. It is not. Because your entire nervous system is wired to react instantly. Evolution designed you to respond to threats with fight or flight, not with calm observation. Your body will resist this. Your mind will scream at you that 3 seconds is too long, that the moment will pass, that you will look weak. Ignore that voice. That voice is the voice of your old self, the reactive self, the predictable self, the self that has been losing every game it did not even know it was playing. 3 seconds. That is all it takes to shift from reactive to strategic, from controlled to controlling, from a pawn to a player. Practice it. Starting today, starting now. Every interaction, every provocation. 3 seconds of stillness before any response. It will feel unnatural at first, then uncomfortable, then powerful, and eventually it will feel like breathing. Here is the second tactic, the mirror response. This is for situations where someone is trying to provoke you emotionally. And believe me, this happens more often than you think. People provoke others not because they want answers. They provoke because they want reactions. They want to see you flinch. They want to see you lose composure. They want confirmation that they have power over your emotional state. The mirror response denies them all of that. Here is how it works. When someone says something designed to provoke you, you do not defend. You do not attack. You reflect. You mirror their energy back at them with a calm question that forces them to confront their own behavior. Let me give you examples. Someone says, "You always think you are better than everyone else." Instead of defending yourself, instead of listing reasons why that is not true, you pause. You look at them calmly, and you say, "What makes you feel that way?" Not defensively, not sarcastically, with genuine, detached curiosity, as if you are studying them, as if their words are data, not attacks. What happens next is extraordinary, because now the burden of proof is on them. Now they have to explain, justify, elaborate. And in doing so, they expose themselves. They reveal what is really bothering them. They show their cards. And you are exactly where you were before. Calm, unshaken, gathering information. Someone says, "Must be nice to have it so easy." You do not explain how hard you have worked. You do not list your sacrifices. You simply look at them and say, "What do you mean by easy?" Again, not defensive, curious, clinical, and watch them struggle. Watch them backtrack. Watch them realize that their comment was not a statement. It was a projection. And you just held up a mirror. Someone says, "I do not know why anyone trusts your judgment." Instead of the explosion they are hoping for, you offer a slight pause, a measured look, and then, "That is an interesting observation. Can you tell me more about what is driving that?" Now they are on the defensive. Now they have to articulate something they probably never thought through. Now the power dynamic has shifted. Not because you were aggressive, but because you were still. The mirror response works because it violates expectations. People expect reactions. They expect anger, defensiveness, hurt. When they get calm curiosity instead, their entire emotional strategy collapses. They threw a punch at a wall they expected to crumble, and instead found steel. And that steel, that unshakable composure, is something they will not forget. They will think twice before trying to provoke you again. Not because you threatened them, but because you showed them that their weapons do not work on you. Here is the third tactic. Selective disappearance. Machiavelli understood that presence is power, but he also understood something more subtle. that absence, deployed strategically, is even greater power. When you are always available, always present, always accessible, you become furniture. People stop noticing you the way they stop noticing a chair they have sat in 1,000 times. Your presence loses its weight. Your attention loses its value. Your words lose their impact. But when you selectively withdraw, when you are there and then you are not, when you engage deeply and then pull back entirely, something shifts in the minds of those around you. They begin to wonder. They begin to notice your absence more than they ever noticed your presence. They begin to assign meaning to your silence, to your distance, to the spaces you create between yourself and the world. In practical terms, this means learning the art of the strategic exit. When a conversation is at its peak, when the energy is highest, when everyone is engaged, that is when you leave. Not dramatically, not rudely, quietly, calmly, with a polite nod and a departure that leaves people wanting more. Because the person who leaves at the peak is the person who stays in everyone's mind. The person who lingers until the energy dies is the person everyone forgets. In relationships, this means understanding that your time and attention are your most valuable currencies. Do not spend them recklessly. Do not be the person who is always texting, always calling, always available, always there. Be the person whose attention is a rare and precious thing. When you give it fully. With a presence so complete that it is almost overwhelming. And when you withdraw it, withdraw completely. With a silence so total that it echoes. This is not a game. This is the understanding that human beings are wired to value what is scarce and dismiss what is abundant. Your grandmother knew this instinctively when she told you not to chase people. Machiavelli codified it when he wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Not because fear is inherently good, but because fear comes from respect, and respect comes from the understanding that your presence is a choice, not a given. Now let me give you the fourth tactic, and this one requires more courage than all the others combined. I call it the controlled confession, and it is based on the fifth pillar, controlled vulnerability. Here is the situation. You are in a negotiation, not necessarily a business negotiation. It could be a conversation with a friend, a difficult discussion with a partner, a conflict with a colleague. The other person expects you to be impenetrable. They expect the wall, the cold exterior, the unshakable composure, and you have given them exactly that, for precisely long enough that they believe it is all you are. And then, deliberately, strategically, you show a crack, not a collapse. A crack. You say something like, "I'll be honest with you, this matters to me more than I've let on." Or, "I may seem calm, but this situation has been weighing on me." Or simply, "This is harder than I thought it would be." What happens next is a shift in the entire dynamic, because when a person who has demonstrated unwavering composure suddenly reveals a moment of genuine humanity, the impact is seismic. It is unexpected. It is disarming. And it creates a bond that no amount of cold strategy could achieve on its own. The other person's walls come down, not because you are manipulating them, but because you have given them the rarest thing in any human interaction: authenticity from a position of strength. This is the difference between vulnerability and weakness. Weakness is showing your cards because you cannot help it. Vulnerability is choosing to show one card, carefully selected, because it serves a greater purpose. The weak man reveals everything. The strong man reveals exactly what is needed, exactly when it is needed, and nothing more. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. The controlled confession allows people to feel, just for a moment, that they are one of the few. And that feeling creates loyalty, trust, and influence that no amount of force could ever produce. Now let me address the errors, the traps, the common mistakes that people make when they first begin to practice cold detachment. Because the path from reactive to strategic is littered with pitfalls, and I would rather you learn from the mistakes of others than from your own. The first mistake is confusing detachment with suppression. These are not the same thing. Suppression is pushing your emotions down, ignoring them, pretending they do not exist. Suppression is a ticking time bomb. It builds pressure. It creates resentment. And eventually, it explodes, usually at the worst possible moment, directed at the wrong person, in the worst possible way. Detachment is the opposite of suppression. It is not denying your emotions. It is creating space around them. It is feeling anger and watching it, feeling hurt and acknowledging it, feeling frustration and allowing it to pass through you like wind through an open window. The emotion exists. You see it. You feel it. But you do not act from it. You act from the awareness that exists beyond it. The second mistake is performing detachment. There are people who learn about cold detachment and immediately begin acting it out, exaggerating their calmness, overperforming their stillness, using silence as a theatrical device rather than a strategic one. This is not detachment. This is a costume. And people see through costumes almost immediately. Real detachment does not look like anything in particular. It does not announce itself. It does not perform. It simply is. The truly detached man does not try to appear calm. He is calm. And the difference between appearing calm and being calm is the difference between a mask and a face. One can be removed. The other cannot. The third mistake is applying detachment indiscriminately. Not every situation calls for coldness. Not every interaction requires strategic distance. There are moments, real, genuine, human moments, that call for warmth, openness, and emotional presence. The funeral of a friend, the joy of a child, the vulnerability of someone you love. These moments are not the battlefield. These moments are the reason you have a battlefield to begin with. The man who is cold in these moments is not detached. He is damaged. And there is a world of difference between the two. True detachment is a tool, not a personality. It is something you pick up when the situation demands it, and set down when it does not. It is the armor you wear in the arena, not the skin you wear in the sanctuary. Master the art of knowing which context you are in, and you will master the art of cold detachment without losing the warmth that makes life worth living. The fourth mistake is using detachment as punishment. Some people discover the power of silence and begin to weaponize it against the people they love. They withhold attention, affection, and communication, not as a strategy for self-protection, but as a tool for control. This is not Machiavellian. This is petty. This is the misuse of a powerful principle by a mind that is not mature enough to wield it. Machiavelli understood power as a means of creating order, stability, and strategic advantage, not as a means of inflicting pain on those who care about you. If your detachment makes the people who love you feel unsafe, confused, or abandoned, you are doing it wrong. The fifth mistake, and this is the most dangerous one, is believing that you have mastered detachment when you have only mastered avoidance. Avoidance looks like detachment on the surface. It feels like detachment in the short term. But it is fundamentally different. Avoidance is running from emotions. Detachment is standing in the middle of them and choosing not to be governed by them. Avoidance creates isolation. Detachment creates freedom. Avoidance weakens you over time. Detachment strengthens you with every passing day. The test is simple. Ask yourself, am I withdrawing because I have chosen to, or because I am afraid to engage? Am I being silent because I have decided this does not require my words, or because I am terrified of saying the wrong thing? Am I calm because I have processed my emotions, or because I have buried them so deep that I cannot feel them at all. If the answer to any of these is the latter, you are not practicing detachment. You are practicing escapism. And escapism, no matter how elegant it looks from the outside, always collapses. Let me give you one more scenario. One more application of everything we have discussed, because I want you to see how cold detachment operates in the most emotionally charged arena of all. The moment when someone you care about betrays you. This is the ultimate test, because betrayal hits every trigger simultaneously. It activates anger, hurt, shame, confusion, and the primal desire for revenge. It makes you want to scream, to confront, to expose, to destroy, and every reactive fiber in your body will tell you that these are the right responses, that justice demands action, that your honor demands a response, and this is exactly where cold detachment earns its name. When you are betrayed, the first thing you do is nothing. Not because you are passive, not because you are weak, but because the moment of betrayal is the moment of maximum emotional distortion. Your perception is warped. Your judgment is compromised. Your decisions will be driven by pain, not strategy. And decisions made in pain almost always create more pain. So you breathe. You step back. You let the initial wave of emotion crash through you without acting on any of it. You give yourself hours, days, if necessary. You observe your own pain with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a wound, assessing the damage, understanding the cause, planning the response. And when the storm has passed, when you can see clearly, think clearly, act clearly, then you respond, not with anger, not with tears, not with the dramatic confrontation that would give them the satisfaction of seeing how deeply they hurt you. You respond with the one thing that betrayers fear more than any other: calm clarity. You tell them what you know, simply, factually, without exaggeration, without emotion. You tell them what you have decided, clearly, firmly, without room for negotiation. And then you move forward. Not with rage, not with bitterness, but with the cold, clean precision of a person who has removed a piece that no longer fits the board. That is cold detachment at its most powerful. Not because it denies the pain, but because it refuses to let the pain decide the next move. The pain is felt, the pain is real, but the response is chosen, and the choice, always, 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 is strategy over impulse, clarity over chaos, the long game over the short burst. Machiavelli would call this virtù, not virtue in the moral sense, but the capacity to act with strategic excellence in the face of fortune's cruelest blows. It is the ability to take the worst that life throws at you and transform it not into reaction, but into position, not into chaos, but into clarity, not into weakness, but into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. This is the transformation that is happening inside you right now. Whether you realize it or not, something has shifted. The way you see conflict, the way you think about reaction, the way you process provocation. It is already different from when you pressed play. And that shift, that subtle, almost imperceptible recalibration, is the beginning of everything. Let me give you one more tactic before we move to the final stage. I call it the sovereign frame. This is perhaps the most advanced application of cold detachment, and it applies to every area of your life simultaneously. The sovereign frame is the mental posture you carry into every interaction. It is the internal narrative that runs beneath every conversation, every conflict, every decision. And it sounds like this: I am the one who decides what affects me. Not them, not the situation, not the emotion. Me. This is not affirmation. This is not positive self-talk. This is a fundamental reorientation of how you see your place in the world. Most people walk through life in what I call the reactive frame. They see themselves as subjects being acted upon. Things happen to them. People do things to them. The world inflicts itself upon them. And from this frame, every response is defensive. Every action is a reaction. Every move is a countermove. The sovereign frame reverses this entirely. From the sovereign frame, you are not being acted upon. You are observing the action. You are above the chessboard, not on it. You see the pieces moving. You understand the strategies at play, and you choose, with cold clarity, which moves deserve your engagement and which deserve your indifference. Here is how this applies in practice. You receive an email at work that is condescending, dismissive, and subtly insulting. The reactive frame says, "They disrespected me. I need to respond. I need to defend myself. I need to show them they cannot talk to me like that." The sovereign frame says, "This person has chosen to communicate poorly. That is information about them, not about me. What is the most strategic response I can give?" And the answer might be a measured, professional reply that addresses the substance and ignores the tone. Or it might be no reply at all, letting the email sit unanswered, creating a silence that speaks louder than any words. Or it might be a conversation, calm, direct, face-to-face, that addresses the pattern without escalating the incident. The key difference is this. From the reactive frame, the email controls you. From the sovereign frame, you control the email. The content is the same. The words on the screen are identical, but the person reading them, you, has changed. And that change in the reader changes everything about the response. Apply the sovereign frame to your relationships. Your partner says something hurtful during an argument. The reactive frame hears an attack and launches a counterattack. The sovereign frame hears pain, their pain, expressed clumsily, and responds not to the words, but to the wound beneath them. The sovereign frame does not take the bait because it recognizes the bait for what it is, a flare sent up by someone who is struggling, not someone who is attacking. This does not mean you become a doormat. The sovereign frame is not about absorbing abuse or accepting mistreatment. It is about responding from a position of strength rather than a position of fear. And from a position of strength, your responses are clearer, calmer, more effective, and far more likely to resolve the actual issue rather than escalate the emotional noise. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The sovereign frame is the embodiment of this principle. It allows you to see the end of a conflict before it has even begun. It allows you to skip the emotional detours, the unnecessary escalations, the wasted energy of reactive exchanges, and go straight to the resolution. Not because you are avoiding the conflict, but because you are navigating it with the precision of someone who has already mapped the territory. But there is one more stage, one final layer, and it is the one that ties everything together in a way that will stay with you for the rest of your life. This is the transformation that awaits you. Stay until the end, because the most important truth is always the last one spoken. You are not the same person you were an hour ago. Let that settle. Let it find its place in you, because something has happened during the time we have spent together, something that cannot be undone. A seed has been planted, not in your mind, where ideas live and die in the span of a day, but somewhere deeper, somewhere more permanent, in the part of you that knows, without needing evidence, that the way you have been living is not the way you were meant to live. You came here reactive. You are leaving strategic. You came here exposed. You are leaving armored. You came here as someone whose emotional world was a public highway. You are leaving as someone who has begun to build walls, not the walls that keep others out, but the walls that keep you inside yourself, inside your center, inside the quiet, powerful, untouchable core that has always existed but has been drowned out by the noise of your own reactions. Machiavelli called this fortuna, the idea that the world is a river, wild and unpredictable, constantly flooding, constantly destroying, and most people, he observed, are swept away by it. They build their lives on the floodplain, and when the waters rise, they lose everything. Not because the flood was too powerful, but because they never thought to build on higher ground. You are building on higher ground now. Every principle you have absorbed today, every tactic you have learned, every moment of awareness you carry forward from this experience, it is another stone in your foundation. A foundation built not on the shifting sands of emotion, but on the bedrock of strategic awareness. You are constructing something that the world cannot take from you, because the world does not even know it exists. It exists inside, silent, invisible, unshakable. And this is where the metamorphosis truly begins. You see, everything we have discussed, emotional sovereignty, strategic silence, observational dominance, calculated patience, controlled vulnerability. These are not just tools. They are not just tactics. They are the architecture of a new identity. An identity that is not built on what others think of you, what others say about you, or what others expect from you. An identity built on the only foundation that has ever truly held, your relationship with yourself. Because here is the truth that Machiavelli understood but rarely stated directly. All power begins as self-power. The man who cannot govern himself will never govern anything. The man who is ruled by his emotions will be ruled by anyone who understands those emotions. The man who reacts before he thinks, speaks before he observes, acts before he calculates, that man is not free. He is merely unshackled. And there is a devastating difference between the two. An unshackled man can move in any direction. A free man chooses which direction to move. Think about the version of you that existed before today. The version that walked into arguments with fists swinging and ego blazing. The version that spent nights replaying conversations, crafting the perfect comeback, seething over words spoken by people who stopped thinking about you the moment you left the room. The version that gave away power, like a man tossing coins from a bridge, watching them fall, hearing the splash, and then wondering why he had nothing left. That version of you served a purpose. It got you here. It survived. It endured. And for that, it deserves respect, not contempt. You do not burn down the bridge that brought you across the river. You honor it, and then you walk forward. Because ahead of you, starting today, starting with the next interaction, the next provocation, the next moment that once would have owned you, is a different version. A version that pauses before it speaks, that observes before it reacts, that chooses before it acts. A version that walks into a room and does not need to announce itself, because its presence speaks a language that words cannot match. A version that sees the games people play and does not feel the need to play back. Not because it cannot win, but because it has already won the only game that matters, the game against itself. Let me tell you what the world looks like from the other side of this transformation. It is quieter. Not because the world becomes less chaotic. The world will always be chaotic. But because you become less reactive to the chaos. The provocations still come. The manipulations still attempt themselves. The people who once controlled your emotions still try. But they find something different now. They find a wall where there used to be a door. They find stillness where there used to be an explosion. They find a pair of eyes that see right through them, calm and unblinking, offering nothing but the quiet certainty of a person who has decided, once and for all, that they will no longer be moved by anything they did not choose. And that is when the real power begins. Not power over others. Power over yourself. The power to feel pain and not be destroyed by it. The power to face betrayal and not be consumed by it. The power to stand in a room full of noise and remain the silence. The power to be tested again and again, and to pass the test not because you are strong, but because you are still. Machiavelli knew that the ultimate ruler is not the one who conquers others, but the one who has conquered himself. Every strategy in The Prince, every observation about power and politics and human nature, it all points back to this single, devastating truth. You cannot outmaneuver anyone until you have outmaneuvered yourself. You cannot see through others until you have seen through your own illusions. You cannot control a room until you have controlled the one thing in it that matters. You. And now you know how. Not perfectly, not completely, not with the effortless mastery that comes only from years of practice, but you know. And knowing is the first step. The rest, the daily practice, the uncomfortable silences, the bitten tongues, the swallowed reactions, the moments of deliberate stillness in a world screaming at you to move, that is the forge. That is where the blade is shaped. That is where the transformation goes from idea to identity. Let me consolidate what you have learned. Not as a recap. You are beyond recaps. But as a set of principles you carry in your chest like stones in a pocket. Smooth, heavy, permanent. You have learned that reactivity is the most expensive habit you own. It costs you relationships, opportunities, dignity, and peace, and it pays you back nothing but regret. You have learned that the gap between stimulus and response is the most powerful space in the universe. 3 seconds of stillness can change the trajectory of an entire conflict, an entire relationship, an entire life. You have learned that silence is not absence. It is presence at its most concentrated. The man who speaks less is not heard less. He is heard more because when he speaks, the world stops to listen. You have learned that observation is the currency of the detached. While others are performing, broadcasting, competing for attention, you are watching, cataloging, understanding. Building a map of human behavior that gives you an advantage no amount of force can match. You have learned that patience is not passive. It is the most aggressive form of strategy there is. The man who can wait longer, endure longer, remain still longer, that man wins wars that others do not even know have started. You have learned that vulnerability, when chosen and controlled, is not weakness. It is the ultimate form of strength, the ability to show a crack in the armor and watch it become a bridge, not a breach. And you have learned that cold detachment is not cold at all. It is the warmest thing you will ever do for yourself, because it frees you. It frees you from the tyranny of other people's opinions, from the prison of your own reactivity, from the exhausting, soul-crushing need to be validated, understood, approved of, and loved by people who have no right to demand any of those things from you. You are free. But freedom is not the end. Freedom is the beginning. Because now that you are free, now that the chains of reactivity have been loosened, now that the walls of strategic awareness are rising, now that the silence inside you is growing louder than the noise outside, now comes the real question. What will you build? Not what will you react to, not what will you fight against, not what will you destroy. What will you build? With this power, with this clarity, with this cold, quiet, devastating awareness that you now carry. Because Machiavelli did not write about destruction. He wrote about construction. He wrote about the building of states, the forging of alliances, the creation of structures that would outlast any individual. He understood that power is not an end. It is a means to build something that matters, something that endures, something that stands when everything around it has fallen. And what you are building, starting now, starting today, is yourself. Not the self that others recognize, not the self that performs for the crowd. The real self, the one that sits behind the eyes, watching. The one that exists in the silence between thoughts. The one that Machiavelli wrote for. The one who was always meant to read these words and recognize them, not as new ideas, but as old truths they had somehow forgotten. Now, here is the paradox. The final paradox. the one that contains everything we have discussed and transcends it all. Cold detachment, at its highest level, is not about you at all. Let that land. At its highest form, detachment is not a tool for self-advancement. It is not a weapon for social dominance. It is not a strategy for winning games against people who do not know they are playing. At its highest form, detachment is an act of love. Love for yourself first, because you finally refuse to let yourself be destroyed by things that do not deserve that power. Love for the people around you, because you finally show up as someone who responds with wisdom instead of wounding. Love for the world, because you finally contribute something rare. A calm presence in a sea of reactivity, a still point in a spinning universe, a mind that thinks before it acts, and a heart that feels without being enslaved. Machiavelli would never have said it this way. He was too strategic, too guarded, too much the fox to speak in terms of love. But if you read between the lines of The Prince, if you look past the cold calculations and the ruthless observations, you will find something surprising. A man who loved order. A man who loved stability. A man who loved the idea of a world where intelligence triumphed over chaos and strategy triumphed over impulse. He was not writing about manipulation. He was writing about civilization, about the possibility that human beings could rise above their basest instincts and create something worthy of their potential. That is what you are doing now. Rising. Not above others. Above yourself. Above the version of you that was content to be reactive, predictable, and easily moved. You are becoming something that the old version of you would not recognize. Something quieter, something sharper, something that looks the same on the outside but moves through the world in an entirely different way. And the world will notice. Not because you announce it, not because you perform it, but because the shift in your energy is something people feel on an instinctual level. They will not be able to explain it. They will not understand what has changed, but they will sense it. In the way you hold eye contact a beat longer. In the way you let silences breathe without rushing to fill them. In the way you respond to provocation with a calm that makes them question everything they thought they knew about you. You will become, in their eyes, someone new. Someone they cannot quite figure out. Someone whose stillness feels more powerful than their noise. And some of them will be drawn to it. Some of them will be unsettled by it. Some of them will try, harder than ever, to break through it. Let them. Let them try. And let them discover what you have discovered. That the wall they are hitting is not a wall. It is you. Solid. Complete, unshakable, and here, at the end of all things, is the simplest truth I can give you. A truth so simple it takes a lifetime to understand. The person who masters themselves needs nothing from the world, and the person who needs nothing from the world receives everything. This is not a paradox. This is physics. This is the gravitational law of human power. The less you chase, the more arrives. The less you need, the more is offered. The less you react, the more you control. The less you speak, the more is heard. Everything that Machiavelli observed about the dynamics of power, every law, every principle, every strategic truth, they all point to this single, breathtaking conclusion. Sovereignty begins with silence. Power begins with stillness. Freedom begins with the choice to stop playing every game the world puts in front of you and start playing the only game that matters. The game of becoming who you were always meant to be. If this message has resonated with you, if something has cracked open inside you, something ancient and waiting and ready, then I want you to do something. Not for me, for yourself. I want you to go to the comments below and write one phrase, just one. The phrase is this: my stillness is my weapon. This is not just a comment. It is a declaration, a silent oath between you and the person you are becoming. It is a line drawn in the sand between the reactive self you are leaving behind and the strategic self you are stepping into. When you type those words, you are not just participating in a video. You are marking a moment of awakening that you can return to again and again whenever the old patterns try to pull you back. And if you have not already done so, subscribe to this channel. Not because I need your subscription, not because it is a number on a screen, but because what we are building here, this space, this frequency, this gathering of minds that refuse to stay ordinary, is a fortress for those who have decided that the world's noise will no longer define their silence. A fortress for those who carry the weight of their own aura instead of begging for the approval of others. Every video you watch here is another stone in that fortress, and together, stone by stone, we are building something that cannot be torn down, because it is built on the only foundation that matters. You. Now go. Walk back into the world with everything you have learned pressed deep into your bones. Let the provocations come. Let the chaos swirl. Let the people who once moved you try again, with everything they have. And when they do, when the old triggers fire, when the old impulses surge, when the old you begs to return, remember this moment. Remember the silence you found here. Remember the stillness that lives inside you now. And respond not with the fire they expect, but with the ice they cannot survive. Go now, and let your stillness be your weapon, not your prison. Let your silence be your answer, not your absence. Let your detachment be your liberation, not your loneliness. And let them wonder, for the rest of their lives, how you became so unreachable. Machiavelli saw this moment 500 years before it arrived. He saw you. He wrote for you. And now, you have answered. The game has changed. And there is one final thing I want you to carry with you. A truth so simple and so radical that most people will never grasp it, no matter how many times they hear it. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. Ever. The man who feels compelled to prove his strength is still borrowing his sense of self from the audience. The man who feels compelled to prove his intelligence is still measuring himself by someone else's ruler. The man who feels compelled to prove his worth is still waiting for permission to exist. Cold detachment, at its deepest level, is the end of all proving. It is the moment where you stop performing for the gallery and start living for yourself. Not selfishly, not arrogantly, but sovereignly. With the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are enough. Not because the world told you so, but because you have done the internal work to know it for yourself. Machiavelli observed that the lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. You have spent this hour becoming the fox. You have learned to see the traps of reactivity, of emotional hijacking, of social manipulation, of your own addictive patterns. And in seeing them, you have become something that cannot be caught, not because you are running, but because you are awake. The world is filled with sleeping people who think they are awake, people who react and call it authenticity, people who explode and call it passion, people who chase approval and call it ambition, people who surrender their inner peace at the first sign of conflict and call it engagement. But you who have sat with these words for an hour and felt them land not just in your ears, but in your chest, you know the difference now. You know that true engagement comes from stillness, not noise. That true passion is controlled fire, not wildfire. That true authenticity is choosing who you are in every moment, not simply defaulting to whoever your emotions demand you become. This is what it means to be Machiavellian in the truest sense, not manipulative, not cruel, not cold for the sake of coldness, strategic, aware, sovereign, a person who has looked at the world without flinching, has looked at themselves without lying, and has decided, with the full weight of their will, that they will master themselves before they attempt to master anything else. And you, silent, still, and more dangerous than they will ever know, are the reason why.